Interviews with Arizonans.
So I was going to tell you this story. My daughter she's 6, and she wanted to be a police officer for Halloween. Mom didn't know this, so we're out shopping. I took the kids out one day just to look at costumes and whatever.
They love that.
They love it.
Yeah. And you're like, why is it so expensive when they're going to wear it for like an hour?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we're out looking at costumes, and I text Mom. I said, okay, Aviana wants to be a police officer. And I just, period, right?
Right.
And Mom immediately texts back. She's like, no. And I was like, and so I pick up the phone and I call her. I'm like, what is going on? Why can't she be a police officer for Halloween? She goes, oh, for Halloween. Like, I'm thinking she knew we were out looking at costumes, and she didn't. She's like, oh, for Halloween, that's fine. But no, she's not going to be a police officer.
Well, and here's the thing, from my perspective, there's nothing better in this world than young girls, little girls especially, who want to grow up and work in law enforcement. Because, it's kind of what I did. I didn't always want to do it from the age of 6, but I ended up going into that field, and it is a field that needs more women.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But that leads to, like, the concern, right? I mean, the concern is, it's kind of like the NFL, where now you have all these studies coming out with concussions, and you go, oh, what is the NFL going to look like in 20 years when, what is the talent level going to look like? Because now you have parents, including football players, they're like, my kids aren't playing football. And it's kind of the same thing I see with policing now, where it's such a... It's such a heroic job, but it's no longer, and there's still, don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of people that look at police officers as heroes.
Right.
But there's a lot of people now, including, and you get the media and all this stuff, and it's like, now no longer are we looking at specifically police officers, not first responders in general, but talking specifically about policing. It's like, what is this going to look like? Because parents are like, you know what? It's dangerous. It doesn't pay well, right? It doesn't pay what it should pay for that level of work, or for what the risks are involved. And then and now you have this climate where you have media and everything else that have just made it so much more dangerous, I think, for police officers. So
there's no doubt. And just your analogy that you used, and you think about the NFL, okay? What is that going to look like in 20 years? Well, what do the retired players in 20 years look like? Where are they? What is their mental health state? All right. Now you go back to law enforcement or firefighters, but specifically law enforcement. Okay. What if we don't address that mental health piece? What do they look like 20 years after retirement?
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many pieces and components, because those that are on the job right now that started, for example, in law enforcement, I don't know, in the last 5 years, they have always operated or functioned being on camera, so to speak. Right. Whether it's wearing a body camera or whether it is someone in the community potentially filming what they're doing.
Right.
So that is somewhat of a norm. But then on the other hand, you've got those that are close to retirement that never grew up or went through their professional career on camera, involved in cameras all the time. They're like, you know what? What a terrible existence. To always, you can't even joke with people.
Yeah.
You can't, obviously you don't want to leave it on if you accidentally go to the restroom. You don't want to leave it on when you order food, right? In a restaurant, because people are going to judge you like, oh, you're going to eat French fries every day? How are you going to chase bad guys or something?
And that video, just so people know, that video does get watched. I mean, I had a real estate client that, that's what she does for a living. She sits behind, they just watch all this police footage from their body cameras. That's what they do all day long. And so that footage actually does get watched because they're looking for discrepancies or whatever that might look like. So anyway.
And I say to people all the time, I mean, imagine, it doesn't matter your field. Okay, whether you are in real estate or whether you're a dentist or an accountant, but imagine being filmed all day, every day.
Yeah.
And if it was made available, would people want to just, I mean, this is our culture now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's reality TV. Right? But maybe sitting around watching an accountant work in their office every day is not near as exciting as somebody driving fast in a car with lights and sirens. But if you could imagine somebody just watching everything you do, knowing that it's going to be posted and it's going to be analyzed and Monday morning quarterbacked, how does that feel?
Right.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. Should we welcome everybody into the conversation?
It's probably time.
It's time.
It's probably time.
Awesome. Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. I am here today with Angela Harrolle, who is the CEO of the 100 Club, which we're going to talk a lot about 100 Club, but it's basically an organization. It's a
nonprofit
organization that raises funds for injured and for first responders who are either injured or killed in the line of duty.
That's correct. That's the starting point. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, Angela's here with me today. Before we dive into the conversation, let me quickly introduce you to my real estate YouTube channel, which is Phoenix Homes and Hotspots. Really cool concept, something that really nobody else is doing in the real estate industry. And that is when you go online and look at homes, very easy to find homes today. You know, everybody has their source, whether it's Zillow or Realtor.com or whatever it is. But finding a home is just one aspect. So think of somebody moving from California where they find a home online, but now they don't really actually understand the community or what are the local hotspots around it. So what we do is we tie all of that together and make it easy for somebody to actually say, hey, not only do I like the home, but I want to live in that community. I want to live next to those restaurants or that shopping or whatever. So YouTube makes it really easy for us to tie all that together. And then if you're a seller, again, not only is your home getting marketed, but we're actually showing people the entire community and what it's like, the actual livability or the lifestyle around that. So that is, if you're watching on YouTube right now in the top right corner, you can go right to Phoenix Homes and Hotspots, subscribe. If you're listening on one of the audio platforms, it's youtube.com/Phoenix Homes and Hotspots. And also we will have this, if you're on the audio platform, this conversation will also be on YouTube under interviews with Arizonans. So with that, let's get back to our conversation. I'm so excited about this because I think that it's such an important conversation, especially today. And so can you tell us a little bit more? Like we just kind of scratched the surface a second ago with what the 100 Club is, but can you go into more detail and tell us exactly what the 100 Club is and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports all public safety. So whether it's law enforcement or fire or corrections throughout the entire state, corner to corner. And in doing so, we provide a lot to them, and we could talk about all of them, but what people know us for the most is line of duty death. So we support financially in the event of a line of duty death that happens here in Arizona, and every single one of them is horrible. But we try to obviously provide initial financial support, but we also make them part of our family.
Yeah.
And we do that because this grief journey that they're about to go on, whether they're a member of the department or whether it's the spouse, if there is one, or a child, or even a parent of a first responder that is killed, it's a long journey, and we, like I said, make them part of our family, and then we go through that for many, many years. It's not just that first financial assistance we provide. It is making sure they're involved in other things that we do. So we take our survivors on an annual retreat. We do camp for the kids, and that kids camp is not actually even just focused on grief. It's just an opportunity for kids who have a similar upbringing or experience in their life to get together to just be kids, because normally these kids only see each other at memorial events and in these sad type environments. So we wanted them to just be kids. So we do those couple things. We make sure that they're taken care of with all of their emergency paperwork or trust documents. We take care of that for them, let them do updates every 5 years. And all of these things are financial contributions and also just a way to keep our community tucked together. So yes, line of duty death, but we also support in the event of a non-line of duty death. And we take care of them if they're injured, for example. And we can do that all the way up to $18,000. So, I always kind of say we put them on our payroll. We give them an additional assistance every single month until they rehab or get back to work, or, sometimes unfortunately they have to medically retire just because of the injury they received. And so we have those couple items, but we also purchase equipment to make them safer. And that's always a good thing, because the more that we can do proactively, right, the less you have to do reactively.
So what does that look like?
Sure. So rural communities obviously suffer a little more. They have budget constraints more so than maybe a central Arizona department. So Phoenix Fire Department, they don't probably need near as much as maybe Benson Fire Department in southern Arizona. Now, equipment that we could potentially purchase, some of them that are like the most obvious would be like, let's say, bulletproof vests, ballistic vests, okay, obviously for law enforcement. And then on the fire side would be turnout gear. Maybe they need an extra set of turnout gear for firefighting, whether it's structural or wildland firefighting. firefighting is a completely different set of turnout gear. So, and then there's some that work better in extreme heat and car fires and things like that. So all of these things are just a few examples of what we could maybe purchase to enhance their safety.
And so why would a nonprofit need to purchase those items? Why is that not all? I mean, that's the first question that comes to my mind,
Sure.
right? Is why,
Yeah.
why? I mean, wouldn't we rather use those resources for the first things that we talked about as
Right.
opposed to equipment? Because that really should come from the state, shouldn't it?
You would think that the city or the state would be the first to provide those, but people have to make adjustments, right? Budget constraints. We just went through a recession in our economy.
Yeah.
There's different reasons. And then I don't want to get too far into this, but then if you go into, let's say, the Defund the Police Movement, they're going to take from somewhere.
Yeah.
And they're not going to take from essential services and support.
That's a great point.
But maybe they're not able to get new equipment, or they're going to use it a little bit longer, or whatever it is. And we recognize those challenges. And in order to get a change made, let's say with a municipality, it's not quite an act of Congress, but it's a process. And it takes a long time, and we might be able to provide that sooner rather than later, again, enhancing their safety sooner so we can prevent injury or potentially death.
Yeah. Don't you also have some support for first responders that's not necessarily injury or death, but you just have different support? Don't you have some different support systems in place for
Sure.
just in general, outside of equipment, right? Just in general.
We have, for example, our heroes assistance that we provide, and a hero's benefit is to support them in the event of any kind of life-altering situation. So let's say their spouse or child has a terminal illness, or they lose a spouse or child. And that obviously directly affects the quality of life and the mental health and physical health of our first responders, whether it's police or fire.
Yeah.
So we are able to provide one-time financial assistance in those scenarios as well. And like I said, if it's a terminal illness or something along that line, that's a $3,000 support. And then for a death of a family member, that would be a $5,000 support level. So those are a couple things we can do there. But we also have 2 apps out there that are bulletproof and fireproof. And those are mental health and wellness initiatives or platforms that provide immediate access to vetted or culturally sensitive resources in the palm of their hand. The beauty with firefighters or the fire service is, they're going to go shopping together to get their lunch. They're going to break bread together later in the day, and they have time to actually spend together. Whereas police officers often will be working in an environment where they are at a significant call, right? Mm-hmm. They are at a traffic scene, and they might have seen a dismemberment or something along that line, and they return to their car alone. And again, it's great to have a website. It's great to send people to a website, but number one, you have to remember what it is, and you're like, okay, if I have time when I get back to the station, then I'll look at it, but think of everything that's going on in their head, everything that they've just seen. So we felt it incredibly important to put it right in the palm of their hand so they can be in their car, take 2 minutes, and say, all right, do maybe some self-assessments, or get resources to therapists near them, or work through financial related issues. There's just a ton in there. And that also includes a kids corner. So before you even get into those resources, on the outset, kids of public safety can go there and they can feel integrated. And whether it's coloring pages or, even a spouse could get in and look at the different resources as well. So that is our initiative. But coupled with that is we provide training to them at no cost statewide. We bring in some great speakers that will help share ways of doing things that improve the service as a whole, or improve them as an individual as a whole as well.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about doing this podcast for 3 years, right? We're about 2 months in now, and for you. 3 years in the making. And so in my head, over the 3 years, I've had all these, I've kind of made this mental list of people that are like, okay, these are the people that are perfect for this podcast. Yeah. But it was like 5 weeks, it was several weeks back. I don't remember. But so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go on LinkedIn, and I'm going to look and see just somebody that pops out at me, right? And so I see one of your posts on LinkedIn, and I message you and say, hey, I have this podcast, interviewing the most influential people and interesting people in Arizona. Can we have you on? Can we do this? And you immediately responded back, said, yes, let's do it.
I was so flattered.
Yeah. You were like, yeah, let's do it.
I'm like, why me though? I don't know if this is going to be boring. People are going to be like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah. So right when you responded, I went onto your website, but I hadn't actually looked at your full profile yet. And so the first thing that I did when you responded was I went out and I read your actual profile on LinkedIn, and your story it's so fascinating. So what is your, even before 100 Club, kind of what is your background story? What's your background? And then we'll kind of lead into how you ended up at 100 Club.
So definitely not a straight line trajectory, so to speak. I started on a farm in rural Minnesota.
All the best stories start on farms in the Midwest somewhere. Why is that? Yeah.
I know, exactly. And I grew up there in a very small town, kind of in the middle of nowhere, relatively speaking, to where we are now. But it was great. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, a farming family, and I have a lot of pride from coming from that environment. But it's a hog farm, corn, soybeans, all sorts of things, but there's a lot of pigs. And I jokingly tell people, because people are like, why did you leave, And I said, well, you only have to pressure wash hog feces into a 90-degree corner one time to know that maybe this isn't your destiny.
No.
Or you want to change the course. So outside of that, didn't travel much as a kid, and I just knew I wanted to go somewhere. And I ended up pursuing my education at Arizona State University.
Okay.
And to go from Minnesota to Arizona, hey, why not? I don't like to shovel, and the mosquito they say it's the state bird. It's really not, but it might as well be. And I went to ASU, and I've been in Arizona in an inadvertent sort of way since the late 90s, mid to late. I don't want to disclose. No, I'm just kidding. Because people start doing the math. And they're like, oh my gosh, she's 90. Yeah.
Okay, so you went to Arizona State, and then from there, your path is, again, your whole path is like really interesting. It's the type of thing that you would never grow up and say, I'm going to do this, because it almost seems like, for me, I guess, it seems almost a little far-fetched. Like, do people really do this? Of course they do. But so tell us about like post ASU, and again, before 100 Club, but post ASU, what is your background coming out of college?
Sure. So I received my bachelor's degree in justice studies, and also with a focus in business. And I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to work in the law enforcement type field, but not the kick in the doors kind of law enforcement, right? I didn't really have that interest in patrolling the streets, and I wanted to be part of a community, there's no question, but I wanted to do something that had a more global impact almost. And needless to say, I got this great internship with the U.S. Department of State Bureau of Diplomatic Security Services. And I did that. And then fortunately, the window opened to apply for a job with them. And obviously, they work all over the world.
Yeah.
Based out of D.C., but work all over the world. And I was fortunate enough to get a job as a special agent with Diplomatic Security Service.
So cool.
Yeah, it was. Because again, I don't know any other special agents in southern Minnesota. I never ran into any. I never mentored with someone. Nothing.
I don't know any other special agents. It's you see them on TV and movies. Other than that, you're the first person I've met that has any ties to this whatsoever.
Oh, that was my past life, but it definitely taught me a lot. It opened my eyes to the fact that, you know what, there are a lot of things above and beyond farming and rural communities, and even just college. No matter where you go to college. And it put me into this world working in the Foreign Service primarily that allowed me to travel extensively to places I never thought I would go to, places I'd never heard of, conditions I never imagined working in. But it ultimately took me to 45 different countries and gave me really incredible perspective.
Yeah.
More than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So from there, how does this evolve to where the 100 let me say this differently, because I'm going to go back to reading your LinkedIn profile. I was on the first paragraph, and I started to think about the 100 Club, and immediately my mind went to, I hope this, because it's a long profile on your LinkedIn, and my mind immediately goes to, I hope this story doesn't end the way I think it's going to end.
Right.
So how do you?
That's a long profile. I mean, for being 29, I mean, that's like, wow, I've been productive.
But yeah, so I'm thinking like, thinking of what the 100 Club is, what it does, and knowing that you're now the CEO of this company, and I'm reading, and I'm like, God, I hope this story doesn't end the way that I think it is. But in the back of my mind, it's like, this is, so how do you go? How do you become the CEO here? What is the kind of the story leading into that?
Sure. So I worked in what we call DSS, right? Diplomatic Security Service, for about 10 years. And during that time, I mean, I started as a young single person. Easy, right? Poor man's jet set. You can go anywhere, do anything, and you're like, oh, I'm so cool and whatever. But short story is, I met my husband very early in my career. I'd been on for just a couple years. And with all of that travel, I mean, we did a lot of executive protection for the Secretary of State. So whether it was Madeleine Albright or the late Colin Powell now. I also worked with Condoleezza Rice and some other pretty cool people, the Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela. I mean, just some really, really amazing figures and some of our past presidents. But I mean, you're just go. And you're traveling all over the world. And all I had to worry about was my house plant. I mean, that was it. Like, I know pets. I just had to make sure that the plant got water about every few weeks. And that was sometimes challenging. But again, I met my husband at the time, and he was wonderful and lived in Arizona, coincidentally. I was just back here on a short trip. And when I came back, everything was great. And then we were doing the long distance thing. And not long after I met him, I got assigned to Santiago, Chile as a foreign assignment at the embassy there. And I'm like, well, this is fun. That was great. And I got to go to Chile. And he's like, where? And we sped things up pretty quickly and ended up getting married. And so he could have diplomatic immunity. And he came with me overseas, which was very nice for that cool assignment, which was about 2 years. And it was wonderful. But as a single person, you just kind of come and go, and you can move at the speed of light. And then you get married and you're like, okay, hang on. Whoa, I've got to consider someone else's, career and all of that in it. So you kind of slow down a little bit, make sure they're included in the process. And then fast forward again, we had a child, because that's sometimes what people do, not long after getting married. So that really slowed me down.
Yeah.
Because you can't just travel for 2-3 weeks at a time, or even 48 hours. I mean, it's challenging. And he happened to also be in the law enforcement field, but he was also a firefighter and a paramedic. So he really had every 7-year-old boy's dream job. And it was good. But then we had another child. And I mean, talk about coming to a grinding halt. I'm like, what are we going to do? This is hard, because he's working 24 to 48 hour shifts. I can't very much travel like I used to, because either I'm gone 24, 48 hours or 3 weeks. And we had to make some really tough decisions. So he took that break and came to Chile to hang out with me. So I, in turn, went on a leave of absence as well, and which kind of brought us back to Arizona and allowed us to, give the kids a little bit of stability and all that. And,
yeah.
So basically at that time, he was, again, fire, medic, officer, and he was working for the state of Arizona for the DPS, Department of Public Safety.
Okay.
It's the state trooper. And he was assigned to their rescue helicopter. And it's really cool. I mean, they get to rappel, they get to, rescue people from canyons and all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah.
But in that process, and even though I had the experience in the law enforcement field, neither one of us had heard of the 100 Club of Arizona.
Okay.
I don't know why, we just hadn't. And it's like, looking back, I'm like, how did you not know? But had no idea. So we're back here in Arizona, and I'm on leave, and he was working a shift up out of northern Arizona. We happen to live here in the valley, but his assigned base was Flagstaff on the Ranger helicopter, they call it, with DPS. And he would do that commute. It was no big deal. again, because he was staying overnight up there and then coming back the next morning. So it was real easy. And he was only working no more than 10 days a month. So easier to do than to relocate the whole family up north or something.
Sure.
So it was a beautiful fall day, and I was here in Arizona and came downstairs. He was at work up in Flagstaff, and I had talked to him a couple times, throughout the day. And this was, let's say, bedtime, okay, for the kids, or at least we're getting ready for bed. And I think you said your kids are 4 and 6,
4
right?
and 6,
Boy
yeah.
and a girl.
Boy
The girl's
and girl.
older.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the time, mine were just shy of that, almost 3 and 5, 2 and
Okay.
4. And my daughter also is older than my son by a couple years. And it was, I don't know, like 7:30. And I ran upstairs to grab their pajamas, and I was coming down the stairs, and my daughter said, "Mom, there's somebody at the door." And I was like, well, that's weird. But again, it's a beautiful fall day. So here in Arizona, most people are familiar. You've got that big, heavy security screen door, right? You can kind of see through it. Yeah, not so much, a little bit.
Yeah.
But we had it locked. But it was, obviously open enough to let some of that air in, and locked so the kids didn't run amok and get lost in the neighborhood. But
Sure.
because at that age, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't have my eyes in so many places.
I'm right in the middle of that right now. I
Right,
understand.
exactly. So I don't know where my son was. He was downstairs, like I said, grabbed the jammies, coming downstairs. And when she said, there's somebody at the door, I was like, well, that's so strange. But I came around the corner, and all I could do was see like a silhouette. And it was a gentleman in a flight suit, which is actually what my husband would wear to work every day.
Yeah.
And so I saw the flight suit, and I was like, well, what is that? And then the closer I got, that flight suit was flanked by DPS state troopers, all wearing the proverbial smoky hat.
Yeah.
And I just said, this isn't good. This can't be good. So I opened the door and I said, well, come on in. And again, the kids are like, what's going on? What's going on? Why are all these police officers here? And that wasn't normal for them in any capacity because, again, he wore a flight suit. That's identifiable. And it's very non-threatening if you think about it. Whereas if you see somebody, and not that a trooper in a hat is threatening in any way, but it's more of that picturesque law enforcement thing that even a little kid can determine. They're wearing their weapon and all
Something,
that.
yeah. Something is,
Yeah. And little kids are so fascinating when they see police officers or firefighters because they are always seen as heroes, which is beautiful.
Yes.
Until the social or the community feel, the culture, or something influences them, they have this very purist form, which I think is amazing. So now they're in the house, and I am just kind of looking at everybody, wondering what in the world. And they said, Ange, Bruce lost his life today during a rescue up in Sedona, Arizona on Bear Mountain. And I was just absolutely in disbelief because I never worried. I don't know why. I never worried. And my first thought was, and what I said was, how's the pilot? And they said, well, the pilot's fine. And I go, what? That doesn't make any sense. How can the pilot be fine? Because in my head, the only thing I thought could possibly happen would be a crash, right?
Right.
Helicopters go down, planes occasionally.
Sure.
But they said, no, the helicopter didn't crash. And I said, then can you please tell me, what happened? Well, during a rescue, when he was, they had gotten called out from Flagstaff and flew to Sedona, right near the Enchantment Resort, if you're at all familiar with that area, Bear Mountain.
Okay.
It's beautiful. Oh my gosh, it's one of the most beautiful places in all of Arizona. There was a lost, dehydrated, stranded couple from out of state that had gone off the trail. And he'd done this rescue, 100 times. It was just like kind of a routine thing almost.
Yeah.
And during the rescue, because of the compromised space of which they were working, because of the incline of the side of the mountain and the helicopter rotor blades where they come over the top, you end up working in this smaller area. Oops, sorry. And needless to say, he was able to put the gentleman in the helicopter. And then when he went back for the female, something happened where she turned around and he went to assist her and he stood up. And he was struck right above his brow area by the helicopter rotor blade.
Oh, my goodness.
And, wearing a helmet and doing all those things, but, a helmet has nothing on spinning blades that exceed 450 miles an hour.
I'm trying to think of like a situation where that's ever happened. Like, what are the odds of that?
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because, again, what are the odds? And so many times individuals that work on helicopters, they preach rotor blade awareness, rotor blade safety. And he preached it all the time. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. He used to educate people. He's the trainer. He was the person that says, no, always do this. And you always walk wide and you don't go in this area. But there's so much focus on the tail rotor because that's what you think of. Like if I remember sitting next to him on the couch and the old TV show ER, I don't know if you ever remember that show, but I loved it and he hated it because he's like, that's not real. It doesn't really happen like that. And I'm like, I don't care. I love it. So he would sit next to me on the couch and watch it, whether he wanted to or not. And I remember one episode where the chief for the hospital met this crew up on their landing pad. And he comes out and he gets too close to the tail rotor and turns and just like that lops off his arm. And I just go, and I look at my husband. I go, I just like, and he goes, never going to happen. I go, never going to happen, he said. I go, okay. That was it. That was my only thought ever about a potential situation like that.
Yeah.
So, and if anyone's ever been around a helicopter, you think about how high that blade is.
Right. That was the first thing that crossed my mind. It's like, that's why I'm saying, like, how does that even happen?
Exactly.
How is that even possible?
And I'm kind of taken aback here because I'm looking like right behind you. There's a picture of the entire aviation unit at the Papago Buttes here in town, which is so cool and how big that unit is. And then next to it is a photo, fast forward, of all of the folks that come up on an annual basis with the mountain in the background of which he lost his life. And it's just fascinating to see how things really kind of come together. But so how does it ever happen? Well, it happened. And it was definitely something hard to process because, again, logic, you need to just remove logic from the equation.
Yeah, right.
And accidents happen. And he was, people talk about, what is a hero? And there's no question he was a hero. I probably didn't give him the credit he deserved when he was here because of what he does every day. But he truly was rescuing two people off the side of a mountain. And they lived, as did the pilot. And he sacrificed his life for theirs.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting. Last week I spoke to Amy, who's who runs the Human Services campus in downtown Phoenix, which is the homeless campus down there.
Yeah.
And I think that, by having these conversations, you realize that for most of us, all of this stuff runs in the background and we see it, we observe it, but we don't fully understand it. And so my mind instantly goes not just to you. And so we see, we see a first responder that's killed in the line of duty. And I think most of us have that soft spot where, it might give you goosebumps, or whatever, but we don't actually think of the people that are left behind. And in this case, it's yourself as well as a 3 and a 5-year-old. Mm-hmm. And having a 4 and 6-year-old, it's heartbreaking to think about these stories. So I think, for people that are listening, I think that one of the things that, just the takeaway that I'm getting right now is like, we just don't spend enough time really thinking about those that are actually left behind as well, because I can't imagine the recovery process. So from there, are you introduced to the 100 Club? I mean, what happens from there? How do you get assistance? But more importantly, like, how do you get back on your feet after an incident like that?
So, well,
or a trauma, like a trauma like that, not an incident, a trauma like that.
I would say, you mentioned the kids, and that's a big part of it, because you're like, okay, all right. So let me turn this off so that doesn't go off again for you, because it'll be hard to edit.
That's all right.
So the trauma, there's no question, but as a parent, how do you explain what's happening when you don't understand it to yourself, to your children? And I'll never forget, sitting down with the kids and putting them both on one knee and the other knee, sitting crisscross applesauce, and saying, I was like, what words do I even use? And I just said, Daddy got a bad owie and he's not coming home. Mm. And they're like, okay. And they went and played, because now we have a house full of people. It's not comprehensible. And I think that what really was helpful but also detrimental was the fact that they were used to him being gone. At the time, I was the one that was home every night. And he was gone for 24 or 48 hours. If Dad's not home, he's at work.
Sure.
It wasn't a constant thing. And he was only gone maybe 8-10 days a month. But that was a natural thing in their world. And it was 3 days later when my daughter said, well, when is he going to come home?
Yeah. At some point, you have to...
That is a punch to the gut like no other. And to try to explain that permanency is really, really hard. So that was, again, I sat them down the first night and you said, how did you learn about the 100 Club? And I was so fortunate to have DPS be able to guide me through this, because I'm in my young 30s and I don't know about you. Do you know how to plan a funeral?
No.
Okay.
No.
It's just like that. You got 2 little kids. They're the center of your world. Everything else has collapsed around you. And you're like, how do I plan a funeral? I don't even know what to do. I don't even know where to begin. So I was fortunate to have them around me. And the next morning after the accident, they came out right away. And as did some other incredibly generous folks. And one of the individuals that came out was a representative from the 100 Club of Arizona. And they provided me with a check for $15,000. And it was the most significant, overwhelming thing I've ever received, because I just knew that at least now I could take the time to plan the funeral. I knew I was going to be able to make the mortgage because we were a dual income family. I mean, it's just like, what do you do? Where do you go? But it gave me the opportunity to go through that process and to grieve and to take time off of work so I could focus on this and my kids. And it was one stressor that was removed, and it was critical. And I was so impressed. I thought, I've got to figure out a way to pay it forward. I want to go back. I want to get back to this organization. I want to get involved. And they're like, whoa, slow your roll. They're like, honey, you got a lot to go through here before you get back involved.
Sure.
But that definitely set me on a course to trying to figure out a way to either pay it forward or give back in some capacity to the organization.
So we talked about who the organization benefits. So now from there, tell us more about what you do. So I have a friend that was injured, Tempe police officer a couple of years back that was injured, shot in the line of duty.
Oh, yes.
And she said, so I reached out to her earlier in the week. I said, hey, do you know,
Is this Lindsay Long?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's incredible. Yeah,
so
Lindsay.
I reached out to Lindsay and said, are you familiar? I knew she was familiar with the 100 Club. I don't remember how I phrased it. I said, do you know, what do you know about the 100 Club? And I told her that, that you and I were sitting down this week. But the one thing that Lindsay told me, through text, we were just texting. Yeah. She was actually in an event, I think, in Texas or something. I was seeing on Facebook all the stuff that she
Oklahoma
does.
City too. Recently, I think she's just doing an incredible thing.
So anyway, she said, Angela was not the first person. She said Angela showed up at the hospital. Mm-hmm. And so my question is this. I mean, what is it? What is this? What do you do? What is... I know that you've accomplished a lot here. So, I mean, I guess part of it is, what have you done here at the 100 Club? But also, what is... And there's probably not even a day in the life. I can't imagine.
No, every day is different.
Every day is, and it just seems like one of those things that it would be, to me, I think it would just be such an emotional roller coaster when you're dealing with what you're dealing with. I always think like the Children's Hospital. Oh, I'm like, I would be bawling my eyes out every day. It'd be like joy playing with the kids, and then just complete disparity when they're gone. For sure. I can't imagine just bawling so I would think that what you do is quite emotional, and but anyway, so give us an idea. Like, what is it that you do? Obviously, you're making a huge difference for these people, but what are some of the things that you've done here at the 100 Club, and kind of what is it that you do, not so much on a day-to-day, but just in general? Like, are you going around to some of these events as well? I know you're a super busy person. What does it look like?
Well, gosh, that's kind of an interesting thing. Well, as I mentioned early on, is our goal is to provide financial assistance to those that are in need. And they don't ever have to, for us, qualify financially. You don't have to say, oh, sorry, times are tough and I can't make my car payment, or I can't make, it's not that way. If they are injured or they have a life-altering situation or a death, then we say thank you either to their family or to them for their service through the assistance that we provide.
Yeah.
And we can provide that ongoing assistance. And I think about, so yesterday, like you said, there's days are different. And yesterday happened to be incredibly challenging. So I started the day, I'm trying to think of where did I actually start? I don't even know. I know, but three things stand out. 3 different meetings I had stand out as of yesterday. Actually, no, that's not true. Okay, so I started the day at Mesa Community College, working with an adjunct professor who is incredible, who teaches a class on victimology. And he is part of this organization called ASIS, which is Security Professionals here in Arizona. And he said, would you come and speak to my class? Do you mind if they ask you questions? And my theory is always about not being the victim. Like, you're not a victim. Make a decision here. You can look at yourself as a victim, but you'll never make any progress. But let's figure out how to not be a victim.
Seems like one of the best life lessons that a lot of people can learn right now.
Yeah, it really is. It's just unfortunate that it usually takes something significant to impact you to know that.
It's tough to be a success if you have that mentality, for sure. It's
sure.
just like, in fact, I would almost say it's just almost impossible so long as you carry that mentality, I would think.
Exactly. So I started the day assisting or presenting to this victimology class, which was a great opportunity. And I always feel like it's such an opportunity to get in front of a younger generation, to get in front, make it personal and have the conversation, because, what you see on the news is not actually how it is, or at least not always. And you need to kind of engage. And like you just said, here we live in this society where we're just kind of going on and everything is like white noise in the back. But there are real people behind this, and that's an important thing to pay attention to. So I started the day, victimology class at Mesa Community College. And then I raced over after swinging through the drive-thru to pick up her requested drink and mine, coffee drink. And I visited a brand new widow, and we both have the name Angela, a little eerie. And she, unfortunately, she has 2 small kids, a girl and a boy as well. And her husband was a firefighter, and he was diagnosed with an occupational cancer due to a carcinogen exposure. And he'd been, obviously going through this cancer journey for a long time, and actually went and they threw him a big retirement party on Friday, even though he was in pretty good shape. But for some reason, he got really, really sick last week. And by Sunday, he was gone. So I was there, 3 days later, and sat down with her and just talked to her, and as basically widow to widow, to kind of allow her to say the things that you probably can't say to most people, and ask the questions maybe you're not comfortable asking. But we also provided her financial assistance. And again, it's a huge relief, because there's so many other things to stress about. She's like, oh, my house isn't clean. I'm like, who cares, right? Mm-hmm. And by the way, people who say their house isn't clean, it's usually spotless, by the way. And hers was.
Right.
But so I spent about an hour and a half with her, just kind of talking through everything that has happened, and then what the next few days might look like, and talking about the services that will happen this weekend, which of course I'm honored to attend. And then from there, I went and met with an individual who was recovering from a severe injury from an ATV accident. And he is well on his journey, though. I mean, this happened several months ago, and we supported it as a life-altering situation because his entire face and head was crushed.
Wow.
Out of state, never fails, right? But he's doing amazing. He's absolutely a walking miracle. He looks like himself, and talk about perspective. I mean, and he happens to be a pilot, all these things, but also a police officer.
Yeah.
So I was able to sit with him and learn about that recovery process and learn about how is he really doing. And for him to tell me at the end of it was simply, I want to be a resource to other people. I want to know that if you meet someone in a similar situation, not necessarily an ATV accident, but someone that might be in that same headspace, that he's open to talking to them. And that's crucial. I mean, that's everything, is to just know that you can talk to somebody who's walked a similar path or had a similar experience. Like myself, meeting a new widow, he said, if there's somebody who's injured that my story can benefit, I want to share it. And that's awesome. I mean, does it get any better than that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So this is kind of an exceptional day. And meanwhile, back at the office, I can't get back there to do all of the, everyday things and process everything else that's coming in. But I have an amazing team. However, so my next meeting that day was, unfortunately, another widow. Another widow with children, and her husband was an MCSO deputy. He was a lieutenant, and he was struck and killed, actually not far from, I believe, where you live, in Scottsdale.
Heard about that. In fact, I think I drove by the hospital. So I drove by the hospital, not knowing anything at that moment, and saw reporters out in front, and I was thinking, and I'm not for sure, but I was thinking in the moment, like, what's going on? And it was like 2 days later when I heard about that, and pretty certain that was what was going on there. So yeah, that was pretty close to me.
And again, he just went to work. Everybody expects to go home, but these firefighters and these officers, they know they might not go home. They expect to go home, but they knew when they signed up that there was a chance. And unfortunately, when I met her, like I said, and this poor woman had been widowed before, I was beside myself. And I just looked at her and I said, you know what? You are what widows talk about that they hope will never happen to them, to be widowed a second time. And she was.
Wow.
But she was doing pretty well, all things considered. But again, preparing for services and the families in the house. And I feel honored to be able to meet these people, to be able to provide this support, because you can see, their shoulder just go, like, okay, now I can breathe. I at least don't have to stress about this part. So that was yesterday.
Wow.
I know. And this year, you talk about that roller coaster. This year is like no other. I'm trying to scream it from the rooftops, because we're numb almost to all of the death and accidents and situations that have happened this year. We've lost a total of 55 first responders since January 1st. It's insane.
That was my next question. 55, did you say first responders?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So between police, fire,
and corrections, yes.
And corrections,
yep.
55. Yeah, I've seen a lot of it this year. In fact, that was my next question. I wanted to talk about your podcast real quick, because I think you were mentioning stories. So on your website, and then we'll circle back, because that was my next question. It's kind of the numbers and what does this look like, right? How big of a challenge is this? But your podcast that you can find right on your website. I didn't even know you had a podcast. So I started like really digging. I'm like, okay, let's figure out who this Angela person is.
100club.org. Yep.
100club.org. And so you have a podcast, and you actually interview folks that, obviously they have to go through their recovery and stuff.
Sure.
But you get to a point where, obviously, you show up as like an angel, like literally. That's. You show up, and it just makes such a difference for them. So you have interviews where somebody could go and listen and really have a better understanding of from the other side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you've told your story, so we've already heard it from that side. Mm-hmm. But again, I think it's worth listening to some of those stories. You really get a comprehension and an understanding for that. So,
and that's the beauty of it. So it's called The Call and Stories from Behind the Badge. So it's almost like that proverbial train wreck. Like everybody wants to know, everybody's looking, but they want to ask. So we have people tell stories, and they are first responders in some capacity. And what they do is they come in and talk about, a call that was impactful to them. It could be happy, it could be sad, it could be, it could be horrific, really. It could be anything, but we want to hear that entire perspective. It's almost like you just said, what's a day in the life like? And that happened to be yesterday. Not every day is like that for me, for sure. But in this podcast, we allow them to share with us some of their experiences and the impact that they've had in their career. And that's beautiful. My favorite one, there's no doubt, there's a Border Patrol agent in there who was shot in the desert several times and saved his own life.
Wow.
That's a fascinating one. And ours aren't very long. They're pretty short.
Yeah.
Actually, they're usually under 30 minutes. But,
Yeah.
And it's...
Which one is that? What's it?
I think it's called Alone and Afraid.
Okay.
I believe. But
Okay.
definitely take a listen because
Yeah,
it
for
is,
sure.
Anyway. And he's a really good storyteller. It's a really good storyteller and it's all true.
Yeah.
I joke all the time. I'm like, all right, folks, we need to make sure there's some resemblance of the truth at the end of this. But no, they're all actually truthful. True stories, every one of them. So, yeah.
Okay. And the podcast can just be found on your website, or do you have it on any of the podcast platforms?
Yeah, it's on all the platforms,
Spotify. Okay,
Apple Podcasts,
Awesome.
on you name it, everything.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Let's go back to numbers. That was my next question. I didn't
Sure.
want to miss the podcast part because I
Thank
think
you.
that's really
Well, and it's great. It's a great way for people, like you said, who are going about their business, who don't really know what exactly happens inside, to actually hear a little bit more about a day in the life. And some of them are the exception to the regular day, but they're still impactful.
So. Did you say that 55 were killed in the line of duty, or that's 55 that are injured and like is it a combination, or is that 55 that have been killed in the line of duty this year here in Arizona?
We have had 55 public safety individuals die this year from January 1st to today.
That's the entire state of Arizona?
That's correct.
That's the state of Arizona, okay.
And just as perspective, but when you said killed in the line of duty, so we're talking about a group here of 55 individuals. We support them all financially at different levels.
Yeah.
So for the sudden and tragic, felonious action or a severe accident, we have had 14 so far this year, which is also a record high number. For those who are listening that are in Arizona, in 2013, we lost 19 firefighters, the Granite Mountain Hotshot crew up in Yarnell. We lost them all at one time. And that's not really 19 families. Think about it. That is, I don't know, it was roughly about 36 families because family trees don't look like trees anymore. They look like shrubs and things like that. And so we were able to support them all. But with great tragedy, often will come great support for these families. And we were able to support them at a very high level. We have lost 55, and there has been little to no support given back to our organization in response to that, which is, it's so challenging. It's almost like there's this dilution of the sacrifices that they've made. And it's also kind of an evolution in our culture after this pandemic. And we're all dealing with things in a very different way. The other thing is, like I said, 14 full line of duty from felonious action or accident. But separate from that, we've lost a significant number of those are all COVID related. People don't understand, but detention officers, they work in jails. They don't get to work from home, work remotely, limit their exposure. They don't get to do any of that. All day, every day. And they're working with all sorts of bodily fluids, not just, people breathing on each other. So you have that. So the detention officer or correction officer field has really been impacted. And then our police officers, they're not and really can't wear masks. They're out confronting the public every day. You can't be a police officer very well from home. Again, and every time they go out there, they're also risking their family's health because they're bringing it home.
Yeah.
And that is so scary because you just never know because, again, no one knows what this magical equation is of who's going to make it through without any issue, vaccinated or not. Who's going to make it through without any issue and who's going to die because of it.
Yeah. So you talked about COVID. I know that the officer down in, South Scottsdale, I think was struck by a car,
That's
right?
correct,
Directing
yes.
traffic.
That's correct.
So obviously there's so many, different ways that they're impacted. How many would you say, I don't know if you have an exact number, but how many would you say have been killed, like accidents versus altercations? right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like an altercation with a suspect, as an
Sure.
example, where maybe they were shot. Maybe you hear about some of these correctional officers that I think last year, and not to get too graphic, but I think a guy was like, a correctional officer dropped on his head or something, like sustained a really
yes.
severe head injury
Yeah, I
from
remember.
getting attacked from a
I remember
inmate.
meeting his widow.
Yeah. So I'm just
unfortunately.
curious. I mean, and again, not an exact number, but how many of these are actually altercations where these guys are like, their life is in danger. Their life is always in danger. We know this, but just their life is in danger from an altercation with a suspect that just has bad intentions.
Oh, there's no question. And I'm glad you asked, and I'm glad I have all the data here in front of me. That's why I've got these big white pieces of
beautiful.
paper. Unfortunately, I mean, that's a lot of people. I mean, it's just beyond my imagination. So I'm looking here, and we've had, let me see, 5 were traffic-related accidents. We had 2 involved in a plane crash. We've had a couple struck by vehicles. Gunfire, obviously, a couple of those as well, and occupational cancer. Firefighters that, were exposed to some sort of carcinogen. And as a reference for people, in the olden movies or old day movies, you would see these firefighters, they have like soot all over their face and it looks nasty. But they're so proud. It's like this badge of honor to have this on their face. And what we know now is that it's a death certificate.
Yeah.
So, and that's part of it. So we cover them because they've been exposed and they've ultimately succumbed to cancer. So yeah. So that's another piece of this. But looking at that 55 number, we've also had 5 suicides.
Oh.
Yeah. So we support
So
those
another
as
area that people, again, you don't really think about. So again,
that's that mental health piece.
Yeah.
And
so
how critical it is.
Yeah. And going back, kind of the first thing that jumps into my mind. So I tend to like to say whatever jumps into my mind, right?
I'll keep that in mind.
But is the fact that sometimes we dehumanize, and I'm gonna use police officers because I think that there's still a high level of respect for our other first responders. But I don't think that we actually, as everyday citizens, that have this expectation that we're going to be protected when we need to be protected. But I don't think, and I kind of go back to the homeless thing in my mind, where it's like sometimes, Amy said something to me last week that really resonated. And I said, Amy, how can people help, right? And she said something really simple, outside of the obvious, which is volunteering, donating, and all that stuff. Obviously, that's a component. But she said something to me that will really stick with me, and that was, how about say hello? How about humanize them? How about let them know that they're seen? Ask them what they need, as opposed to just assuming and just moving on with your day or just ignoring them altogether. And I think that you could use that exact same thing with police officers. One of the things that I've really done over the last couple of years, when I see police officers, I always walk up and just say, hey, thank you guys.
That's so important.
So important.
I mean, it's almost one of the most important things. And again, using law enforcement as an example, they do so many amazing things. But when we are like the dehumanization piece, people do that as a protective nature. They don't really want to know sometimes because it may affect them and it could be hard for them. And to know that you have individuals out there going through such challenges is hard on the rest of the community sometimes. And that's okay. But saying thank you, recognizing their service is important, because I think about, okay, so we've had, 3 struck and killed by vehicles. And so often that is because of, and not always, but a distracted driver.
Yeah.
It might have been somebody who picked up their phone to text. It could be whatever. But your action as a driver puts them at risk. So the other side of that is let's say you were speeding, okay? And you get pulled over and you get a ticket. Well, you're mad probably. Well, guess what? Be glad you didn't get a ticket every time you were speeding, right? And think about that for perspective.
You're speeding once, you probably do it quite a bit.
Yeah, there's a chance that you might have exceeded the posted speed limit.
Yeah.
And if that happens, just remember, when you're getting that ticket, it's to remind you that the roads need to be safer. And you also have an officer standing outside the door or the window of your car who is potentially exposing them to, let's say, COVID-19. They're standing on the road. They could be hit and struck and killed, and they leave their families behind and their colleagues. So there's so much ripple effect. And, people are talking about all this. There's, negative rhetoric surrounding law enforcement, for example, and then there's the let's defund police.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that was one of the great perspectives that I left with after working in an international or global environment. I was in a lot of places that 911 was not an option. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine that you're having your worst day, or you're trying to help somebody else on their absolute worst day, and you can't call for help? Or let's say you call for help and you got to wait in line. Mm-hmm. Or the other piece would be that what if we didn't take care of their mental health and we didn't provide them resources, and they didn't have the opportunity to go out and rehab in the appropriate manner, and they were making a lot more sacrifices. Imagine that. So now you call 911 on your worst day. I don't know about you, but you expect them to show up with their A game.
Absolutely.
You do not expect them to get there and be like, hey, my back hurts. I can't get out of the car.
Yeah.
Can you just come over here? I know you have a little problem, but just over. No, it doesn't work like that.
That's right.
They don't get to have bad days. They don't get to say, hey, my back hurts and I can't do that. They don't get to stay home, per se, work from home. And you want their A game.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important that we take care of them. And for us, we often say we're their backup. We're the backup that supports them, that supports their families, that does everything that we can to make sure that they have the best equipment, or the equipment that will make them safer. We want to make sure that their physical health is taken care of and they have the opportunity to rehab if there's an injury. And then we also want to take care of that mental health piece, provide them resources, safe, anonymous resources, so that they can maybe check out something away from their department, so that they can continue to improve upon the person that they are, so that they can be a better first responder in the end.
Yeah, I think we can agree, I think most people can agree that we take them for granted.
Always.
Right. We just assume that it's what you just said. We assume that they're going to show up when we call 911. That's the way it works. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Without question.
We don't take into consideration what a day in the life looks like for them, right? We don't take into consideration. So officer pulls me over and has an attitude. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what a jerk, right? But at the end of the day, and I think you can just use this in life. And I had a conversation with a friend about this recently, and again, it puts it in perspective. But I have no idea what that guy just went through, especially a police officer. I have absolutely no idea what his week looks like, what his day looks like, what his last 30 minutes looks like. Mm-hmm. So we take these guys for granted. So I don't want to glaze over the mental health part of this, because I think that these guys deal with things that the average ordinary person, myself, right? I mean, the average ordinary person would never sign up for and has absolutely no understanding of.
Right.
So with that mental health component, don't you have you have a resource? Don't you have like a hotline? You mentioned 5 suicides. Do you have something in place for that?
So those are the apps that we have in place.
Okay.
And that is the Bulletproof and the Fireproof app.
Okay.
And that is that central resource for public safety. Obviously, Bulletproof being law enforcement and Fireproof being firefighters.
Okay.
But those exist, and they're just filled with a ton of resources, like I said. And it could be anything from, let's say you have stress, you have anxiety, you are having financial issues, which sometimes turn into marital issues, which sometimes turn into suicidal ideations. And that's really hard. And they have to have a place where they can raise their hand in a safe place that says, you know what, I think it's probably best I talk to somebody, versus not having a resource. Or think about the stigma of which they're trying to get rid of. But stigma is something that crosses, generations sometimes. And if you are, let's say, an officer, female or male, and you are not doing well at home, money's tight, you've experienced a few critical incidences that you are struggling to get through, and now all of a sudden you feel like there is no hope, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and now guess what? They want to defund your mission.
Yeah.
And they still expect you to get out into traffic that is moving. And if you've ever been on the 101 in Scottsdale, I mean, what's the average speed? 80?
Right.
And they're going to step out of their vehicle And they have to think about everything around it. Think of all of those things that accumulate, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that leads them to a really horrible place where they need more resources. Let's say they have suicidal ideations, okay? They not only have those thoughts, but they're carrying a weapon that could potentially facilitate those thoughts.
Yeah.
So for them to walk into their supervisor, to their chief or whomever it is and say, yeah, I'm not doing so well. I'm actually thinking about committing suicide. Well, guess what? There's an obligation to remove their weapon to protect them from themselves.
Yeah.
And if you do that, it removes their ability to do their job. And if they can't do their job at the highest level, because so now you've got a career issue, right?
Yeah.
So now that identity that you have, now you can't work either. I mean, how is that going to help the situation?
Right.
It's hard. So we want to make sure that they have other places to go to, in addition to their resources that are offered by their department or their insurance company. We want to make sure that we can supply them an opportunity to get help anonymously in a safe place where the individuals that are supporting them are culturally sensitive to what they go through every day. We also don't want to re-traumatize a therapist or a counselor because, you know, if they bring some of these day-to-day activities and share them, that can be a secondary trauma as well.
Yeah.
So we really, really believe in that piece of our program. It's awareness, it's wellness in general, whether it's making sure you're eating better, making sure you're taking care of your physical health, making sure, because think at the end of a 35-year career, your adrenal glands are probably shot.
Yeah.
I mean, think of the ups and downs. Imagine you come up on a scene just as a pedestrian, you're like, or a person maneuvering a vehicle, and you're like off to the side and you see this accident happen, what that does to you. And this might be the only one you see for years or ever. And they're experiencing them on a very regular basis.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. You know, a first responder, the traumatic things that they see, whether, you know, I guess the odds of a police officer being involved in a shootout is probably not great, but it happens all the time. We see it. We know it's a risk.
Unfortunately, we hear about it on the news.
But it's a great point that you make, because when you think about the trauma that they're involved with, just pulling up on an accident where death is involved, it happens every day on our freeways.
Oh,
I mean, I guess every day.
So
I'm assuming every
devastating.
day. Maybe
Sure.
I shouldn't say
Yeah.
every day
Right.
in a generality, but it happens a lot. These guys see it they see it a lot.
They sure do.
And that has to be, to see death in that way has to be a traumatic thing. So I'm glad that we touched on the mental health component, because I think that, again, it's just one of those things that I think as the average ordinary person, we just take these guys for granted, and we have to stop. We have to stop.
We definitely do. There's no question. Because, you know, here's the beauty. Again, funding is important, but when you call 911, they don't ask you if you are blue or purple or green or black or white.
That's right.
They just want to know two things. Where are you and how can we help? It's just that simple. And that's what they respond to.
I want to. I wanted to refer back to your website real quick, and then I want to talk about one more important topic, and then we'll talk about like how people can help and that type of thing.
Sure.
But I wanted to refer back to your website because we were talking about some of the injuries and some of those types of things. So you have a section on your website called Honor the Fallen,
Yes.
which is, again, just an opportunity, and I'd really encourage people to just go onto the website and look at the resources, listen to the podcast, listen and see the stories of these people, so that we can kind of put more of a human, humanize
right.
these people, and honor these people as well. When you see them out and about, again, just so my daughter now knows that Phoenix PD. She likes to talk to the police officers,
That's
but
great.
she also now knows that there's a reward involved. So they have the little badge stickers.
Oh,
so she
okay.
now also knows
So
that
she has her own little badge.
Yeah, so she always,
like it.
she likes to go and
Yeah.
talk to the police officers, knowing that she gets her little badge sticker that she can wear around.
Adorable.
So anyway, but I wanted to mention that part of your site. Okay, let's talk about one more really important thing that I think that is just something that needs to be discussed, and then we'll kind of close with how people can help. But so what we're seeing, and I don't want to get too involved with what's going on around the country, so we'll try to keep it local, but I think that you have to have some perspective with what's going on around the country. Mm-hmm. So I was downtown a week and a half ago, and I drove by the, I guess it's the main police station down there, and on the building there's a sign that says bonus,
hiring bonus,
$7,500, right? So it's interesting because we're seeing what's happening. You've mentioned several times, defund the police. And so we're seeing what's happening around the country. I think, from some of the numbers that I've heard over the last couple of years, and this is kind of prior to 2020 even, going back just prior to 2020, I heard a number as far as our police staffing. We've been understaffed for years, from my understanding.
Yes.
I heard a statistic that we have the population roughly of the city of Philadelphia. From a city of Phoenix standpoint, our population now, Phoenix Metro is different, but I'm just talking about city of Phoenix versus city of Philadelphia.
Okay.
Similar populations. We have about a third of the police force, and then on top of that, we're already, So I don't know if you could make an argument that we're 2/3 understaffed. Maybe Philadelphia needs it more than Phoenix. I don't know. But what I do know is same population, a third of the police force. I'm not, now don't quote me on that. No. It's just this, it's something that I heard that I'm not quoting a source, but here's the reality. We are understaffed. We're doing signing bonuses of $7,500. I've heard it in other cities of $5,000. Now, some of these crazy mayors, and I'm just going to say it the way that it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you're a mayor of your city and you decided to defund the police in the middle of riots, you're insane. I'm sorry. There's just no other way to put it. So now these mayors, Jenny Durkin in Seattle, my hometown, right? Jenny Durkin in Seattle now begging police officers to come back. It's like, what did you think was going to happen?
Exactly.
Right? And so anyway, I want to talk about it. So when I here's the first thing that I thought of when I heard defund the police. And again, I mean, not even thinking about the police side, but now I think we need to think about that side. The first thing that I think when I hear defund the police is, what are you going to do? What is that going to do to neighborhoods that need the police?
Sure.
So think of this. I had a conversation a few weeks back with a gentleman that does opportunity zones, right? And so one of the things I asked him, I said, how do you create opportunity if you can't first control safety? Tell me one neighborhood anywhere in the world that's decimated by crime where there's opportunity and success. There can't be one, because
it's almost like they can't go together.
They can't go together. You have to create safety. So another interview, and I'm just gonna talk here for a second because I watched this fairly closely. So the guy. I can't remember his name, Hawk Newsom, I think, BLM, New York City. He recently said, well, if this new mayor comes in and kind of, puts what do you call it when they're not, when they're not wearing their uniforms, plainclothes, police officers back on the street, there's going to be riots and there's going to be violence again, is basically what he said.
Okay.
Then he was interviewed after that, and he actually I heard this interview, and the person interviewing him was really trying to pin him down on, do you endorse violence or not? And he spent 10 minutes on that. But inside of that conversation, he said something that I thought was really interesting, that I felt like the interviewer missed an opportunity. What he said was, look, we go into our communities trying to create better schools, better opportunities. And, and so he kind of diverted from the defund the police to what BLM is, what he's saying BLM is doing in their community. And I'm like, well, that sounds amazing, but how does that work? How are you going to go into a community where defund the police came from BLM? And look, I'm not trying to completely trivialize BLM. I'm actually trying to compliment that statement right now. But how do you defund the police and then expect to bring opportunity and better education into a neighborhood where you've completely turned it upside down and ravaged it with crime? So we know that these cities that have defunded the police, which right away you went, what brain surgeon thought of that idea, defund the police? And then these cities actually did it. And now Minneapolis just had a vote. They're trying to double down. It's like your crime has skyrocketed after you defunded the police, and now you're actually voting whether to completely get rid of your police department. What? Who are these people?
It's insanity.
So I guess, that's the side of it that I always think about. But here's the side of it that we don't think about. What does it do to the police officers when you defund the police? What do you do when all of a sudden now you're understaffed? I mean, we talked earlier about equipment, as a result of defund the police. What happens now when you've either the media and the politicians have kind of chased them out? I don't think in the city of Phoenix we've defunded the police, but we created a citizen review board, which I'd like to understand that better. Who's on this board, and are they activists, right? Are they being trained? Are they going out and doing police training? I'd like to understand that setup a little bit better as well, city of Phoenix. But at least I don't think we've defunded the police, but look, we've discouraged them, like we talked about at the outset, right? We've literally disincentivized people to go out, put themselves in harm's way, because now they're no longer. I mean, now we're not even looking at them as heroes anymore. So that's the end of my rant with that. But my question is, just kind of getting feedback and comment back from you. What are the effects of these people being understaffed? And we know it's here in Phoenix. We've seen it around the country, but I don't think we spend enough time thinking about that component, because now, in fact, one more thing I read recently. ABC 15, I think, put out an article about 2 or 3 days ago with an officer that basically resigned. Said, you know what? I'm overworked, underfed. Like, I can't even get a meal. I can't sleep because I'm overworked. I'm underappreciated. I can't remember all of the article, but essentially just resigned. They're like, you know what? This is ridiculous. So we know that it's happening. What are the effects? I mean, what are you seeing, or what are your comments in regards to that, in terms of, because I think that puts them in danger, right? If you have less police officers, they're working more hours, and ultimately, as opposed to maybe 4 people responding to a scene, maybe it's 2 people responding to a scene. That has to put them in danger.
Of course.
So what are your feelings on that?
Well, I believe it comes down to the 3 R's. And this is being felt in other sectors as well. And these R's go in a different order depending on what you're talking about. And that is recruitment, retention, and retirement. And with the influx of the pandemic and everything that has happened, it's changed our culture in a lot of different ways, and it's affected different industries in different ways, okay? It would have been great to be in the lumber industry or construction. That would have been amazing, right? However, law enforcement specifically really faced a lot of challenges during this last 18 months to 2 years. And those that were working in the field, this is just the world according to Angela, my perspective is many of those that were working that had enough years on said, whoa, okay, this is enough. Like this, we are going into a place that I don't even want to work anymore, and I have the ability to retire. I'm going to do it. So those people move on to greener pastures and hopefully happy and content and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then, so that's in this scenario, retirement is the first thing. So you've got an entire generation that is like, oh, if I can, I'm going to.
Yeah.
So now you have that depletion in your staffing. And how do you recruit in that same environment? Who in the world would want to sign up? Like I said, you're wearing a body camera and you're probably not going to get paid as much. And you know that people generally are really in this upheaval.
Yeah.
How do you do that? And then you've got those in the middle that you're trying to retain, to keep at your department, to keep that stability within your communities. And let's say it is your hometown of Seattle. So let's say you have people that are really committed to that humanitarian aspect, who are committed to serving your communities, but you've got some that are retiring, you can't get new ones, and you're just doing everything you can to function with that core group. You're looking at retention, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Because they are seeing people go, they can't go yet. They're not ready. Or they want to get out of, let's say, downtown Seattle, for an example. And they're going to go to a rural community, or they're going to get a hiring bonus, let's say, and nobody's going to be the media they're not as focused in a rural area as maybe they are in the center of downtown Seattle. So really, I believe it's that recruitment, retention, and retirement piece. And when you have all 3 of those being stressed in every single way, that equates to a staffing challenge. Yeah. And that equates to a potential it's harder to cover all of the areas in town with limited staffing. And we believe, and I believe, public safety as a whole believes, you need to make sure that staffing is the priority. So this brings me all the way back around to, you said, why would you as an organization, as a nonprofit, need to buy equipment to make them safer?
Right.
Well, right now, we need to keep them as safe as we can. We can't afford to lose one, ever. And that's the priority. And we do need more public safety out there, law enforcement officers in the streets. There's no question. And people also deserve to retire and enjoy their lives and not have to deal with this craziness.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act. And I really admire the leaders out there that are doing everything they can to make sure that they are supporting those that are currently working and yet trying to recruit new, fresh people and perspective.
Yeah. It just seems to me like it just is one more element of danger on top of everything else that they deal with when you don't have proper staffing. It just seems like it just puts them in more danger. So I'm just curious kind of what you're seeing on that level, and if you're seeing, some of that in terms of, the people that you serve. But
well, I think everything is triage in some capacity. I mean, people in the medical facility or facilities, they always look at that. I mean, that's number one, triage, right? How significant is the issue? And I don't know exactly what every department is doing, but you can only imagine that when a call comes into dispatch, there are priority calls and there are priority scenarios. And those will continue, there's no question, to be serviced and served at the highest level, but it might be pulling from others that don't rank in that same priority level. They're still important, but you're going to have to maybe wait longer.
Yeah.
And you can only push so many people in one direction. You want to make sure that you can backfill these positions. And it's wonderful to have community supporters or volunteers. And if they're going to defund police in a particular area in our country, well, great. All right. So now you have a community volunteer, say Ethel, and she's 79. And she's like, absolutely, I will respond to talk to those that are involved in, let's say, domestic violence. Well, you're going to have to wait. And then you wonder about the education level. And then you wonder about, the true danger of a situation. Domestic violence is one of the most dangerous calls an officer can ever go on, ever, because of the volatility.
Yeah, we talked about Lindsay earlier. That's how she was shot. Like
her and her partner.
You want to send somebody this unarmed into a domestic violence situation?
Never.
It's just it's such a bad idea.
Never.
Such a bad idea.
So there are a lot of challenges in different capacities, but is it affecting them? I'm sure. Yes. Yeah. Whether they're physically injured or they're suffering from a wellness or a mental health perspective, yeah, it takes a toll.
It's hard to put a numeric value on it, but certainly
I hope we don't ever have to.
It could be an attributing factor to what's going on. We so as far as I think we've covered pretty well how people access the services. Let me ask you this: if somebody's injured, or if there's again, God forbid, an incident where somebody's a first responder is killed or injured in the line of duty, 100 Club automatically, if it's in the state of Arizona, right? This is the 100 Club of Arizona. So if it's in the state of Arizona, you automatically respond. That's something that you're automatically 100% there.
100%.
And then we talked about the fact that for other situations, I think we covered it pretty well. I mean, the website is pretty well designed for all of the other stuff, any other challenge they have. So
it is. And then there's other real positive things that we do. And again, for their sacrifice on a day-to-day basis, they don't have to be injured or killed in the line of duty, but we also provide scholarships to all their children. They're never going to get rich in this job. I mean, they're public servants. That's what they are. They're peace officers, public servants. And so we want to also say thank you to them with the opportunity to provide a scholarship maybe to one of their children. And that's important too. So you just said, hey, how can people, get involved? What can they do? And any kind of support that comes to us goes back to our first responders. And that is our absolute number one priority. And that would be, for example, obviously people, and you've covered this obviously in other podcasts, but there's the financial support, which is critical. There's no question.
And you have a link on your site. So on your site, again, there's a whole link and a drop-down box of all kinds of things. So let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah. So obviously you can just give, right? Financially, you can write the check, you can make a donation. We love that. Now, but there's so many other ways to do that. Let's say you work for a larger corporation or company and everybody gets to wear jeans on Fridays because you donate $5. Great. think of us as one of your charities.
Yeah.
If your community is having a picnic, you then do a give back as part of your community picnic. One of the other, there's a lot of other things, but anyway, volunteering, obviously. We always need volunteers to help support.
So let me stop you right there and back up. So are you, is 100 Club one of the organizations where, so in the state of Arizona, you can actually designate your, no.
So there's a lot of different ways. So people can donate, and sometimes there are tax benefits. For us, we're a nonprofit. So any kind of donation that comes into us is a financial donation and is a tax write-off, for example.
Yes.
Now,
yes. Okay.
Like you said, I had mentioned volunteering, but another way to give back, and many Arizonans over 18 have a vehicle, right? Our license plate is amazing. I'm a little biased. I get it. But we are actually the number 2 license plate in the entire state. And that is an amazing thing because on it, and there's a picture back there, I'll have to grab it here in a minute, but actually I can show you an example. It's actually part of the backside of my business card. But it says right here, it's that distressed black and white flag with a thin red line and a thin blue line right through the middle of it. And at the bottom of it, it's basically a thank you, and it says supporting public safety. And in Arizona, if you choose a vanity plate, it costs you $25 as part of your registration.
Okay.
And the beauty is that $25, 17 of it goes back to whichever respective nonprofit. So when you get a plate just because it looks cool, great. But if you want a plate that also has a significant purpose and you believe in that and you want to say thank you to public safety, choose that plate, put it on your car. It's super cool, right? It looks good on everything, and it really reflects that you are supporting police and fire. And those are the ones that are interacting probably with your plate, hopefully not too often, but they see it more often than other people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The other thing with donating that I think is really important is as opposed to just one-time contributions, just that monthly, right? Even if it's like whatever that looks like, because at the end of the day, it's all about cash flow. I mean, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast are business owners, right? We understand cash flow, and cash flow is not a one-time. It's like, look, I'm in the real estate business.
Right.
A commission check is awesome. I want a commission check every week. I don't want a commission check every 3 months or every year, right? So I think that when you think about donating, I think that monthly contribution, I mean, even if it's just the smallest thing of what can you
the equivalent to one coffee.
Yeah, and it's
$5.
Yeah, and it literally, it just keeps the cash flow and it just keeps things moving. So anyway, so you have so we're going to go back to volunteer in a second, but I just wanted to go a little bit deeper on the donation part. And again, on your website, it's really, really well laid out. There's a tab, very straightforward. Again, 100club.org.
Correct.
Okay.
100club.org.
Also on there's the volunteering aspect. So so tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities for volunteering.
Again, volunteering can be in a lot of different capacities. It's to support maybe events that are happening throughout Arizona. Not necessarily events that we're holding or we're hosting, but we might be the recipient for it. One of the favorites every year is Country Thunder. We're very fortunate to be their charity of choice.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. It's so much fun. It's super dirty, loud, late, but fun.
I've been once. Not my wife's scene. We went once. My wife's like, I'll do anything once.
Right.
Country Thunder was once.
Well, and it's so much fun. And I jokingly say, I'm like, those are our people. But we need a lot of volunteers, for example, for that event. And it is because we do a 50-50 raffle out there and we're interacting with the crowds and people are supporting and making donations, which is fabulous. But that takes a lot of volunteer staff too. So it might take, 40, 50 people. So there's a lot of different activities, and that's kind of a fun one. And then there are others, like I said, community events that give back, just within parks, and, maybe your daycare facility is doing something, or your Girl Scout troop needs to be involved in a community event. There's just so many different ways. And that volunteering, one piece, it's not really truly a volunteer, but it inherently is we have a youth council. And our junior and senior youth council is an opportunity for kids from 12 to 17 for the juniors and then 18 to 24 for the senior level youth council to get involved, to learn about not only the 100 Club, but learn about those careers in public safety. Learn about philanthropy. Integrate that into what you do every day. Sometimes they're able to get hours for school, as credit, for example, of being involved and doing something. And they also have a volunteer piece. So it's a way for us to influence, hopefully in a very positive way, the next generation so that they can also spread the good word and know that there are ways to give back without actually having to write a check or giving up your Dutch Bros or whatever the case is. But even they are wanting to do it, which I love.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You talked about a couple different events. Is there anything coming up in the next 30 to 60 days, event, fundraiser, anything that you want to talk about?
So this is obviously a very challenging time of year. Everyone's really busy with Thanksgiving and also Christmas, but with the idea of just giving thanks. Please thank your police officers, thank your firefighters, say thank you by putting the license plate on your car, the season of gratitude, make a commitment to pay it forward wherever you want. I mean, of course, we would love for it to be the 100 Club, but if it's not the 100 Club, just pay it forward. Just know that your world is bigger than you.
Yeah.
And what goes around comes around.
Let's talk local. I always like to finish, and here's the cool thing. Usually, I like to finish with people's favorite local charity. We know what that is, but also local restaurants, and you just happen to have ownership in some local restaurants. So let's talk about them real quick. In fact, one of them is one of my favorite personal hot spots. So what? Tell us what you're up to on the restaurant side, and tell us about your restaurants.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to be involved in a couple different restaurant concepts here in the Valley, and my role is pretty limited, obviously, because this is all consuming, but we have a couple in downtown Ocotillo in Chandler. We have the Living Room, which actually has several locations in Ahwatukee and then also up north at DC Ranch. But we have Chop Chandler, which is an incredible steakhouse. We have Rock Lobster, and then Sea and Smoke, which is our seafood version of, let's say, Chop Chandler. So we've got quite a few out there, and it's just fun. Also, the one thing about, the restaurant industry versus the public safety or the nonprofit sector is everybody needs to eat. Everybody loves going out to eat. Yeah. Everybody loves food and drinks and things like that. And there isn't that same type of judgment level, which is good,
right.
And it's like you could take a breath, and that's where you break your bread. And
you're able to balance your life.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for you.
So it's wonderful. And again, just supporting. Whether you're supporting a local nonprofit or whether you're supporting a local restaurant, it is critical right now.
Yeah.
Just because of the evolution of our society, and lean into your community, whatever it is. Just lean into it and focus on, pay attention to your neighbor. We so often live in this society where people go into their garage and they shut the door behind them before they even get out of their car. And it's like, maybe just take a minute and check on your neighbor. Say hi, thank your postal service person, whatever it is, just take a breath, show gratitude, give thanks. And if you wanted to forego that cup of coffee or whatever your beverage is only once a month, or no, as much as you want, of course, but to give back or pay it forward, I think that would be, that would be impactful.
Please do. Yeah, we need to get back to a pre-COVID life.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah,
we had a campaign this past month about just donate $1 for public safety, and if we had every adult over 18 donate $1 in Arizona, just Arizona, that's several $1 million.
Yeah,
$1. So if you can't do a lot, you can even do a little. And it all adds up.
And that's where that monthly comes in. That's why I think that monthly is so important. It just kind of keeps things moving forward, as opposed to doing it one time and forgetting about it. Right. You're actually attached to the cause.
Oh, and I mean, you're going to pay your Netflix bill every month, right?
Yeah.
And that's a put it and forget it situation. So what if it was a $1 or $5 every month or 10 or 20 or whatever your ability is? Invest in your community. Invest in your public safety. Give back to them to make sure that they are the best possible first responder they can be when they show up at your door.
Absolutely. Angela Harrolle, you've become like a hero for so many people.
No.
You really have.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
I want to congratulate you on all of your accomplishments here, and thank you for your service.
It's the honor of my life. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this show, remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and share this interview. You never know when you might change a life. If you'd like to get involved in the conversation, you can watch this full podcast episode in our Interviews with Arizonans YouTube channel and engage by liking, sharing, asking questions, and commenting on this or any other interview on YouTube. Thanks for listening to Interviews with Arizonans. Remember, keep asking questions until you get the real answers. We'll see you next time.